The chief steward of the Grand Vizier brought his master news at noon of a bright blue day, that the same men who had come from Canaan last year now had returned again. "You wished to be informed," he said. "Yes," said Joseph. He was in his working room in Pharaoh's palace. "How many are there?" "10, my lord. I think 10. Joseph felt his heart beat faster. "Wait for them in the marketplace," he said to the steward. "When they arrive, take them straight to my house. Slaughter an animal. Prepare a feast. I will share my evening meal with them." By a stern self-discipline, Joseph spent the day attending to his regular affairs. Nevertheless, he placed himself near a latticed window from which he could watch the sons of Jacob. He saw his steward step forward to meet them. He watched the exchange of greetings, and then their faces fell, troubled by his invitation. Twice the steward tried to lead them to the governor's house, high on the hill. Twice he had to turn back and beg them to follow. But all at once the men opened their pitiful sacks, pulled out a great deal of money, spread it on the ground, and gesticulated, loudly explaining something. The good steward only put the money back again, grabbed their sacks himself, and in this way persuaded them to follow. Next Joseph ordered Simeon's release. He too was led to the vizier's private quarters. Then late in the day Joseph himself walked home. As he approached his courtyard he heard a babble of Hebrew voices. "Simeon, Simeon, is it you? How are you? Oh, Simeon, how did they treat you?" And Simeon's voice, "How is father?" "Oh no, Reuben, you brought Benjamin?" Joseph felt such a constriction in his throat that he feared he could not speak. "Benjamin is here?" He strode into the courtyard, and with a hard tone said, "How is your father? Is he alive?" The brothers immediately fell on their faces before him. His interpreter repeated the question in Hebrew, but the brothers didn't move. Joseph barked, "Stand up." The interpreter didn't have to repeat it. The men rose slowly, gazing at Joseph with genuine fear. Wordlessly they pushed pots and jars toward him, balm and honey and gum and almonds. Joseph said, "The old man of whom you told me, Jacob, Israel, is he well?" In Hebrew the brothers murmured, "Your servant, our father, is alive. Yes, and he is well." The breath was squeezed in Joseph's chest. Suddenly he saw the 14-year-old Benjamin, the image of their mother Rachel, a remarkable fall of dark hair. And then Joseph couldn't breathe at all. His face flamed with emotion. His nostrils flared. He pinched his lips and frowned like thunder. The brothers shrank backward from him. Joseph whispered, "This is your youngest brother?" Judah stared at the governor. "Yes," he said, "Benjamin." Joseph said, "Benjamin." But the name on his lips undid him. He covered his face and rushed from the courtyard to an inner room, where he burst into tears and wept. "Benjamin." During the meal that followed, Joseph watched how furtively his brothers ate. 11 brothers. Their hunger must be violent within them, but their fear must be greater. They nibbled. He sent them enormous portions. He sent Benjamin 5 times what he sent the others. Still, everyone only nibbled. To his chief steward he whispered, "Go and fill the sacks of the Hebrews with food, and with their own money again, all of it." He pointed at Benjamin. "And in the sack of the lad, place my silver cup. Go!" Speaking through the interpreter, Joseph required the shepherds to spend the night in his own quarters. Then he left them. He did not sleep at all that night. Immediately at sunrise the following morning, he heard the commotion of men preparing to leave. He ascended to the high window of his house and watched them go with haste, in fear, and elation. 11 of them. Without turning around, he spoke to the steward waiting behind him. "Follow them," he said. "Block their progress. Ask why they would repay the vizier evil for good. Ask for my silver cup. Make them open their sacks. Call him who has the cup a thief, and bring him here." Joseph watched his servant ride forth in a magnificent chariot, approach his brothers, command them to halt, command them to open their sacks. He watched the terror thicken in his brothers' faces as money fell out before the grain. And then, when the silver cup rolled out of Benjamin's sack, he saw how the 10 older brothers all took hold of their robes and tore them. They made a terrible wailing. He could hear it even here, on his hill, in his house, behind the lattice of his window. He watched them slowly retrace their steps, returning to the house again. He was sitting on a dais in his royal chair when they were ushered into his presence. "What have you done to me this time?" he asked in Egyptian. Judah spoke, broken by his anguish. "What can we say to you, my lord?" he said. "God has found out the guilt of your servants, and we shall be your slaves, all of us." "No," said Joseph, "not all of you. Only him whose sack had my silver cup. Him. The rest of you can go home to your father." Judah's face twisted with grief. Joseph set his jaw. Judah crept toward him, and then bowed to the floor. "Oh, my lord," he said, "let not your anger burn against your servant for speaking." Joseph stiffened. He was fighting tears, but Judah flinched in fear. He gathered strength and spoke nonetheless. "The first time we came, you asked about our father. We told you the truth. He is old. He has already lost one son. He will die if he must lose another, especially his youngest son Benjamin, but that is the one you demanded to see." Joseph raised his face and shut his eyes tight. Judah said, "Our father begged us not to bring the lad here to you. He said that any harm to Benjamin would bring his gray head down to death, because Benjamin's mother had 2 sons and one is gone. But you demanded it, my lord, so I argued hard for Benjamin's coming. I vowed to bear the blame of any trouble. I took an oath. Therefore I beg you, let me stay in my brother's stead. Take him, not me. How can I go back to my father if his son is not with me? What could I say? I cannot. I cannot." Joseph could not control himself any more. In Egyptian, he whispered, "Get out! Everyone but the Hebrews, leave the room!" When they were alone, he looked at his brothers and burst into tears. He knelt down in front of Judah and embraced him. In Hebrew, he said, "Brother, didn't you know?" He stood up and went to Benjamin and kissed him. "I am Joseph," he said. "Reuben," he sobbed. "Reuben, look at me." "Simeon, I am your brother." "Levi, look, I am not dead. I did not die. I'm alive. It's me. Dan, Asher, Gad, Naphtali, it's me, Joseph." One after the other he fell on the necks of his brothers and held them close until all the men were weeping. "I have been in the hands of God from the time you took me from my father. Oh, my father, please go to my father. Tell him who I am. Tell him Egypt is prepared to receive him in royal glory. Issachar, Zebulun, run to our father and bring him here to live the rest of his days in peace. With me, with us, with his whole family surrounding his tent all the days of his life."